What? What are you? I was surprised by the sudden change in thoughts. Surely he didn't regain his sense of reason after hearing my words. How could that be? I was a bit confused. In the first place, I didn't start this operation with the expectation of such a result. The Theater Master's simulacrum is embarrassed. The Theater Master's simulacrum has strengthened his control of the character Yoo Jonghyuk. Ugh! Yoo Jonghyuk's eyes blurred again. Indeed, I had felt hope, but it was too unreasonable for him to wake up himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a Sunfish. I'd be grateful if he didn't commit suicide. The ether in Yoo Jonghyuk's blade trembled. The character Yoo Jonghyuk splitting the sky energy has grown. In the meantime, the skills received through transmission were becoming stronger. It was thanks to the talent of the main character. The white pure star energy gradually collapsed as I kept struggling. I didn't know if it was the limit of the skill itself or a difference in talent. I glanced at Lee Gil-young. Blood was pouring down from his nose. The time had come. Jonghyuk. Perhaps after today, Yoo Jonghyuk would become surprisingly strong. I pushed his sword away as hard as I could. Do you remember what I asked you before? I asked if I could hit you? There was a difference in natural talent. In the next few years, Yoo Jonghyuk would become incomparably stronger than me. But not right now. At least for now. You told me I could hit you if I could. Do you remember? If I did this now, then at least for a moment. Blade of Faith is activated. The special option of Unbroken Faith is activated. The ether property is converted to fire. I could overwhelm this ridiculous guy. Ether Blade. The fire ether appeared in an empty space. Yoo Jonghyuk was surprised by the sudden attack and took a few steps back. He instinctively felt that it was something extraordinary, but it was too late. The stigma, Song of the Sword, has been used. Song of the Sword. It was one of the strongest combat buffs that the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare could provide. Your sword is filled with the words left by the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare. There was a large variation in the attack power depending on which verse was sung, but it was perfect skill for me right now. Shooting arrows like rain and protecting the Generalissimo from guns firing on all sides. An enormous magic power emerged and all the burning ethers were united. I swung it towards Yoo Jonghyuk. The chaos was like a thunderstorm. The fire ether took the shape of arrows and started to bombard him. It was an attack that couldn't be used for a long time due to insufficient magic power. However, this would suffice. Numerous red wounds appeared all over Yoo Jonghyuk's body. In this damn world where coins represented all values, and the constellations decided the development of the world, I still needed Yoo Jonghyuk. Thus, I would protect him today. Yoo Jonghyuk's action stopped as the flames burned the area. His fire resistance meant it might not be a serious blow, but it was enough to force him to a state of inactivity. I looked at the Theater Master sitting at the edge of the garden. The Theater Master simulacrum is extremely alert of you. Now was the only chance. I started running. In the distance, I could see the Theater Master stiffen. Then, the character Yoo Jonghyuk has used Recovery Level 2. Damn it. Yoo Jonghyuk was already chasing after me. Recovery. It was a scam skill where he could recover quickly after being hit hard once a day. He obtained this skill due to transmission. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't be faster than Yoo Jonghyuk, who used Red Phoenix Shunpo. I ignored the Theater Master in front of me and collided with Yoo Jonghyuk's sword. I could only believe in my last card. I cried out with all my strength. Gil-young! The moment I cried out, there was a huge crack in the ceiling of the sky garden. The black dome surrounding the roof was breaking. The Yoo Jonghyuk running towards me was also the Yoo Jonghyuk manipulated by the Theater Master. He looked up with surprise at the ceiling. It was generally impossible for the shielded area of a hidden scenario to be broken, but it was possible for uncommon existences. In the distance, Lee Gillian was crying while wiping his bleeding nose. In order to deal with a monster, you had to call a monster. A huge insect dug into the cracks of the broken dome. Like thin glass, the dome broke and the roof was split apart. The astonished Theater Master screamed. A monster that could destroy the shielded area of a hidden scenario. It was like a gigantic praying mantis, the insect king of a great size. The sixth great insect king, Tanaptera, has appeared. It was an appearance that caused goosebumps. The monster had been fighting with the poisonous rhino the other day. The monster came here through response to Lee Gilling's diverse communication. Lee Gilling laughed. Titano? Titano? Don't tell me. It did look similar, but surely not. The huge praying mantis flew towards the Theater Master, then Yoo Jonghyuk blocked it. The character Yoo Jonghyuk has used strong self-defense level 4. There was a massive sound and Yoo Jonghyuk's body was pushed down to the floor of the rooftop. Yet Yoo Jonghyuk was still standing. He was really a ridiculous monster. He could do with a sixth grade species with his current abilities. Yoo Jonghyuk even launched a counterattack. The Tanaptera screamed at the hard blow. Surprisingly, Yoo Jonghyuk was on par with the sixth grade Insect King. Maybe it was something he saw when he was fighting me. The color of the Theater Master was returning. Yoo Jonghyuk was strong. It was a sudden situation, but the Theater Master thought he could win. He was wrong. He should have been looking at me. I ran toward the Theater Master again. There wasn't long left on diverse communication. I couldn't let Lee Gilling's efforts be in vain. The Blade of Faith is activated. The Theater Master belatedly discovered me and shouted. The Theater Master Simulacrum. According to the settings of Ways of Survival, this named boss was made with all the heart and soul of Constellation. A lot of time passed and he was in the deteriorated form. becoming the boss of a hidden scenario. However, he was still able to penetrate Yoo Jonghyuk's mental barrier. The one who received the divine protection of a constellation, he was never a pushover. The Theater Master Simulacrum has triggered Simulacra. It was a delirium skill on a higher level than the Spectre's welcome prison. The surrounding space distorted, and all types of illusions appeared. The monster seemed closer to reality than illusions. The ground rats, grolls, poisonous rhino, T-Rex, the monsters I had encountered so far were running towards me. The fierce teeth and violent claws ripped and clawed at me, but I didn't stop. I wasn't afraid. It was all fake. They didn't exist. They were all fiction from a novel. The moment the blade of faith reached his neck, the Theater Master Simulacrum has triggered mental erosion. Mental erosion. It was the advanced cognitive manipulation skill used on Yoo Jonghyuk. I wasn't afraid because I had the fourth wall, but something unexpected the moment he penetrated my head. The Theater Master Simulacrum is embarrassed. Abyss of the ego. All types of thoughts gathered and the pages of waste survival fluttered. This is... Numerous texts emanated of faint light and floated in the darkness. It was the chapters of waste survival that I had read. The exclusive skill, fourth wall, is activated. The complexion of the Theater Master changed as he dug into my head. He looked at the strings around him and his face whitened. Don't tell me you... This was the last thing he saw. Strangely, he looked at me in awe. The moment Blade of Faith was about to cross his neck, a dazzling light came from his body. It was like a ghost touching a divine light, or the penalty for breaking a taboo. He was destroyed without a trace. I looked down at my hands and felt dazed. What just happened? The Theater Master Simulacrum has been killed for the first time. You obtained 9,000 coins as compensation. You have met the conditions to clear the hidden scenario. You obtained 4,000 coins as compensation. These messages rose. I looked back and saw Yoo Jonghyuk collapsing after being released from the Theater Master's control. Fortunately, he didn't die. The same was true for Lee Gil-young, who had forcibly used diverse communication. Hyung? I rushed over and embraced Lee Gil-young. Lee Gil-young lost strength and fainted in my arms. The barrier surrounding the theater dungeon has disappeared. The barrier covering the ceiling vanished, and I looked at the Insect King. Surprisingly, it turned around and fled. It was like all interest had vanished. I breathed out with a sense of relief. It was over. Are you okay? Jonghyun and Lee Ji-hye staggered over. I'm fine. Hyun-shi? I'm fine. Fortunately, Ji-hye is safe. Lee Ji-hye was hit a ton by Yoo Jonghyuk, and she couldn't speak because her mouth was swollen. The ending time of the third main scenario is approaching. Perhaps it was time for the end. I looked at the rooftop and saw that dawn was coming, making the day brighter. If Lee Hyung-sung was here, he would recite the homeland prayer. Jonghyun groaned. So... The ruined city area was illuminated by the faint light of dawn. I heard intermittent explosions from far away. Now there was no more poisonous fog. The poisonous rhinos were crushed under the collapsed buildings. I could see people fighting amongst themselves. They were probably a group that ended the scenario before us. The huge landscape was trapped inside a huge dome. It was a large barrier that seemed to be breaking. Currently, Seoul was isolated in a transparent dome. Jonghyun said, Really, it's all ending. It was a scene that had to be acknowledged once again. I looked at the collapsed buildings and thought that Minosoft would be somewhere there. Yusung would be disappointed. That's because Yusung was a person who worked hard. Lee Gil-young wiggled in my arms. Have you regained consciousness? Lee Gil-young nodded and pointed to the sky. From a distance, a meteor shower seemed to be falling. The meteor shower was originally the forerunner of the main scenario. However, the number of meteor showers was more than before. It meant the hall would open soon. The meteor showers were probably falling all over the world. Jonghyun admired it. Pretty. Jonghyun didn't know. The meteors that looked beautiful from a distance would make a nightmare for the people where it fell. Now a bigger disaster would come. Lee Gil-young gathered his small hands together and muttered something. Jonghyun and Lee Ji-hye were silent for a while. Maybe they were also praying. It was funny, wishing to the beings who would become a source of nightmare. It was probably only human beings who did this in the entire universe. After a while, Lee Gil-young opened his eyes and looked up at me. Hyung isn't making a wish? I looked down at Lee Gil-young and replied, I have made a wish. What is it? Gil-young, you shouldn't ask that. Jonghyun scolded him. I watched Jonghyun, Yoo Jonghyuk, and then the collapsed soul again. I wished to see the novel's epilogue. Lee Gil-young looked up at me with confusion. I silently gazed into the sky. There were slight cracks in the sky above Seoul. Once the sun rose, the Dokubis would open a new hell.